But nature, at times, has its own guardians. On the bank, a rare albino lion, a mystical vision of power and purity, watched. Known for its innate aversion to water, the majestic feline felt something deeper than ancestral fear. The fragility of life in danger, the injustice of that cruel abandonment, awakened in him an instinctive force of protection. Against all his nature, against the dread of the current, the albino lion plunged. With surprising agility, he tore through the turbulent waters, reaching the woman before the river could completely swallow her, a beacon of hope and salvation where there had only been despair. The albino lion's plunge was an act of pure contradiction. Every fiber of his being, every ancestral instinct, screamed for him to retreat from that cold, treacherous water. But the image of the elderly woman, defenseless, sinking into the liquid darkness, overrode millennia of aversion. His powerful paws, made to tear through earth and hunt on the savannah, now awkwardly beat against the relentless current. The river, a hungry monster, tried to drag him to the bottom, but the lion, with fierce determination, fought. He reached the woman. Her body, heavy and inert, floated dangerously close to the surface, her eyes closed, her skin pale as sea foam. With surprising delicacy for a predator of his size, the lion positioned himself, allowing the woman to lean on his broad, muscular back. It was not a planned rescue, but a raw instinct for salvation. The icy water lashed his muzzle, entered his ears, but he ignored the discomfort. The urgency of the life on his back was all that mattered. High on the bridge, the slender figure of the daughter, Sophia, was paralyzed. Her eyes, once cold and calculating, were now wide with a mixture of disbelief and horror. A lion, an albino lion of all creatures, was rescuing her mother. The perfect plan, the guaranteed inheritance, everything was unraveling before her eyes. A hysterical laugh bubbled in her throat, but was choked back by a knot of panic. No one would believe her. No one. The image of that majestic feline, white as snow and strong as a rock, defying death to save its victim, was too surreal to be real. The current was a formidable adversary. The river, deep and wide, seemed endless. The lion, panting, felt the woman's weight and the water's resistance. His muscles burned, his breath grew short. He was not an aquatic animal. His body was not made for this, but the same force that had driven him to plunge now compelled him to continue. He swam towards the nearest bank, a rocky and steep strip of land, an additional challenge for an already exhausted body. The woman, Donna Ilara, began to cough. The water she had swallowed rose in her throat, and she opened her eyes, blurry and confused. The first thing she saw was the wet, white fur beneath her face, the damp mane brushing her cheek. A muffled roar, more a grunt of effort than of fury, echoed near her, the smell of wild animal, the warmth of the body supporting her. She couldn't process it. Was she dead? Was this a vision of the afterlife? An angel with claws and teeth? Fear mingled with pure perplexity. With a last, titanic effort, the lion finally reached the bank. His claws scraped the wet stones, seeking traction. He pulled his massive body out of the water, dragging Donna Ilara with him. The woman's body, now lighter without the water's resistance, was gently deposited on the wet grass. The lion, exhausted, collapsed beside her, panting, his chest rising and falling rapidly. His golden eyes, once filled with dread, now shone with a mixture of weariness and a strange satisfaction. Donna Ilara coughed again, expelling more water. She turned, propping herself on her elbows, and finally saw her savior in all his wet glory. The albino lion, gigantic, magnificent, with his drenched fur clinging to his body, looked like a freshly sculpted marble statue. The fear, which should have been overwhelming, gave way to astonished admiration. He wasn't attacking her. He was protecting her. High on the bridge, Sophia stumbled backward. The scene below was a nightmare. The old woman was alive and with a lion. She needed to act fast. No one could know. No one could witness that aberration. Panic transformed into a cold fury. She pulled out her phone, hands trembling, to call whoever could solve that problem. But what would she say? "A lion rescued my mother, whom I pushed off the bridge." The irony was cruel. The lion, noticing Donna Ilara's movement, raised his head. His eyes swept the bank, searching for any threat. The woman was safe, but the sense of danger still hung in the air. Donna Ilara's vulnerability was palpable. The feline, against all his instincts, felt a protective need. He rose, shaking water from his mane, and positioned himself between the woman and the world, an unexpected guardian in a scenario of betrayal and miracle. The cold night breeze began to blow, and the river continued its indifferent course. But on the bank, a new and improbable alliance had been born, under the distant and terrified gaze of the daughter. What would happen now? Where would they go? And how could an elderly woman and an albino lion survive a world that was not ready for them, and a daughter who desired their death? The night promised to be long and dangerous. The night breeze, once an indifferent whisper, now became an icy whip against Donna Ilara's drenched skin. Every muscle in her body protested. The throbbing pain mingled with the confusion of a mind that refused to accept reality. She was alive. And by her side, an albino lion, a creature of legends, panted, the warm vapor of his breath mixing with the cold air. His golden eyes, once wild, now seemed to carry the weight of a superhuman effort, but still they were fixed on her, a silent and unexpected guard. High on the bridge, Sophia's slender figure trembled, not from cold, but from an icy rage that mingled with pure panic. The phone in her hands seemed a useless object, a piece of plastic incapable of resolving the aberration unfolding below. What call would she make? To whom? "Hello, I pushed my mother off a bridge and a lion saved her. Can you come fix this?" The phrase was absurd, a cruel joke that only deepened the hole of despair into which she was falling. Her mind, once so sharp and calculating, now spun in a whirlwind of catastrophic scenarios. The inheritance, the perfect plan, the freedom she so longed for, everything was at risk because of an animal. An animal that defied logic, nature, and her own destiny. Donna Ilara, with a faint moan, tried to move. Every fiber of her being cried out for warmth, for refuge from that penetrating dampness. The image of Sophia's face, distorted by hatred at the moment of the push, began to solidify in her memory. It wasn't an accident, it wasn't a stumble, it was a cold, deliberate betrayal. The pain in her chest, once physical, now became a wound in her soul, deeper than any drowning. But beside her, the lion, as if sensing her anguish, let out a low growl, a sound that was not threatening, but almost comforting. He rose, shaking his wet mane, and with a damp muzzle nudged Donna Ilara's shoulder, a silent invitation to move. The lion, exhausted, knew that the rocky, exposed bank was not a safe place. His instincts, sharpened by the invisible threat and the woman's vulnerability, cried out for shelter. He began to move away slowly, looking back, waiting for her to follow. Donna Ilara, with a monumental effort, dragged her aching body. The trust she placed in that predator, a creature that in any other circumstance would be the epitome of terror, was a testament to the depth of her despair and the strangeness of that miracle. Every step was agony, but the lion's presence, his massive white body like a beacon in the darkness, was the only thing that propelled her. Sophia, watching from above, saw the scene unfold. The old woman and the lion moving away from the bank, disappearing into the darkness of the undergrowth. An uncontrollable fury consumed her. They couldn't just vanish. She couldn't allow it. The idea that her mother could somehow tell that surreal story to anyone was unbearable. No one would believe it was true, but the mere possibility that the truth, however absurd, could come to light was enough to ignite a cold fire in her chest. She needed to find them. She needed to finish what she started. With a silent roar of frustration, Sophia threw her phone back into her bag and ran to the car. The engine roared to life, and she sped across the bridge, tires squealing on the asphalt. She didn't know where they would go, but the river was long, and the bank at some point should be accessible. The night was her ally and her enemy. It would hide her steps, but also the sight of her prey. Meanwhile, the lion guided Donna Ilara through the dense vegetation. His eyes, accustomed to the darkness, detected every branch, every stone. The woman stumbled, scraped herself, but the lion slowed his pace, waited, even nudged her gently with his muzzle, encouraging her to continue. The smell of the forest, damp and earthy, replaced the smell of water and death. They delved deeper into the woods, moving away from the river, away from the bridge, away from civilization and the murderous daughter. The lion stopped before a small rocky recess, almost a shallow cave hidden by thick bushes. It wasn't much, but it offered a minimum of shelter from the biting wind. He entered first, sniffing the air, making sure there were no other threats. Then, with a movement of his head, he indicated for Donna Ilara to enter. She dragged herself inside, collapsing onto the cold, damp ground, but grateful for the protection. The lion lay down at the entrance, his massive body blocking most of the wind, his eyes fixed on the darkness beyond. Donna Ilara looked at him, at the silent majesty that had saved her. In her eyes, there was no longer fear, only deep gratitude and a perplexity that defied understanding. Who would believe her story? She, an elderly woman betrayed by her own daughter, rescued by an albino lion who hated water. It was madness, but it was her madness, her truth. And at that moment, nestled in the makeshift shelter, with the warmth of the lion's body radiating a strange security, she knew her life would never be the same. The night was still young, and danger in the form of her own daughter was lurking. But for the first time since she had been pushed, Donna Ilara felt a spark of hope. The hope to survive, to understand, and perhaps to find justice. Donna Ilara, with a monumental effort, dragged her aching body. The trust she placed in that predator, a creature that in any other circumstance would be the epitome of terror, was a testament to the depth of her despair and the strangeness of that miracle. Every step was agony, but the lion's presence, his massive white body like a beacon in the darkness, was the only thing that propelled her. Sophia, watching from above, saw the scene unfold. The old woman and the lion moving away from the bank, disappearing into the darkness of the undergrowth. An uncontrollable fury consumed her. They couldn't just vanish. She couldn't allow it. The idea that her mother could, somehow, tell that surreal story to anyone was unbearable. No one would believe it was true, but the mere possibility that the truth, however absurd, could come to light was enough to ignite a cold fire in her chest. She needed to find them. She needed to finish what she started. With a silent roar of frustration, Sophia threw her phone back into her bag and ran to the car. The engine roared to life, and she sped across the bridge, tires squealing on the asphalt. She didn't know where they would go, but the river was long, and the bank at some point should be accessible. The night was her ally and her enemy. It would hide her steps, but also the sight of her prey. Sophia drove like a madwoman, the headlights cutting through the darkness of the dirt road that bordered the river. Her eyes swept the dense vegetation, searching for any sign, any trace. Rage consumed her, fueling her determination. She could not fail. She would not fail. The image of the white lion, a ghost amidst reality, haunted her. How was it possible? Where had that animal come from? And why on earth would it save her mother? Sophia's mind, accustomed to controlling every variable, was in a tailspin. She needed an explanation, but more than that, she needed a solution. And the solution was simple. Her mother needed to disappear forever. Suddenly, the car's headlights illuminated something on the bank. A dark smudge in the mud, near where the vegetation was sparser. Sophia braked sharply, the car skidding. She jumped out, her heart pounding. It was a footprint, large, enormous, unmistakable. The footprint of a feline, and beside it a dragged trail, smaller but visible in the damp earth. The trail of a human body. The proof was there. They had exited the river there, and they had plunged into the woods. A cruel, icy smile formed on Sophia's lips. She had them. They couldn't go far, not with the old woman wounded and the lion exhausted. The hunt had truly begun. She returned to the car, grabbed a powerful flashlight and a hunting knife she kept for emergencies. The night was dark, but Sophia was used to getting what she wanted. And what she wanted now was silence. Her mother's eternal silence. In the small, rocky recess, the lion raised his head. His sensitive ears picked up a distant sound, a car engine, and then silence, followed by human footsteps. A familiar scent, but now tinged with a dark intent, began to spread through the air. He growled, a low, guttural sound alerting Donna Ilara. The woman, who was beginning to feel the cold and exhaustion overwhelm her, opened her eyes. She saw the tension in the lion's body, the way his muscles contracted, his golden eyes fixed on the darkness. Danger was approaching. The hope she had felt moments before was replaced by an icy terror. Her daughter was coming, and this time there would be no bridge, no river, no miracle to save her. The night, which had once seemed a refuge, now became a trap. The night, which had once seemed a refuge, now became a trap. Outside, in the impenetrable darkness of the woods, Sophia's footsteps were like drumbeats in Donna Ilara's chest. Every branch that snapped under her daughter's feet, every rustle of leaves, echoed with the promise of an inevitable end. The air inside the small rocky recess, already cold and damp, seemed to freeze even more with the proximity of danger. Donna Ilara cowered, her eyes fixed on the imposing silhouette of the lion, who remained motionless at the entrance. His muscles, previously relaxed in a superficial sleep, were now tense, ready for action. The low growl he had let out moments before was a warning, a premonition. Sophia advanced through the forest with cold, calculating determination. The powerful flashlight in her hands cut through the darkness, revealing a world of dancing shadows and twisted trunks. Her eyes, hardened by fury and despair, swept every inch of the terrain. The footprints on the riverbank had been the confirmation she needed, the map to her revenge. The dragged trail, though subtle, was her mother's, and the giant, unmistakable footprints belonged to the white aberration that had dared to defy her plans. A shiver of hatred ran down her spine. That animal, that wild creature, had become the biggest obstacle between her and the freedom her mother's money represented. The smell of the forest, damp and earthy, now mingled with a stronger, wilder scent. The smell of animal, and beneath it, the faint, unmistakable scent of her mother, a mixture of sweat, river, and the floral perfume she always wore. Sophia tightened her grip on the hunting knife's handle, the cold metal against her palm. She was not a killer by nature, but the situation had pushed her to a limit where morality dissolved before necessity. Her mother was a mistake that needed to be corrected. The lion, an inconvenience to be dispatched. Inside the shelter, Donna Ilara felt her heart pound against her ribs. The lion, with an almost imperceptible movement, turned his head slightly, his golden eyes gleaming in the gloom. He sniffed the air, absorbing every nuance of the approaching scent. Sophia's scent was complex, familiar, but now laden with an aggressive intent that his wild instincts identified as a threat. He let out a low, almost inaudible growl, a sound that vibrated on the rocky ground and made Donna Elara shiver. It was not a growl of fear, but of warning, of possession. Sophia stopped abruptly. The flashlight's beam danced over a dense bush, and for an instant she thought she saw a glint, a white glint. Her eyes narrowed. There was something there. The scent was stronger, undeniable. She approached cautiously, knife raised, body tense. Every step was deliberate, silent. Adrenaline coursed through her veins, sharpening her senses. The lion rose slowly, his massive body filling the cave entrance. He didn't growl, didn't roar. He simply stood, a silent wall of muscles and white fur, his eyes fixed on the approaching beam of light. Donna Elara, behind him, could feel the tension in every fiber of his being. She couldn't see Sophia, but she knew she was there, just a few meters away, separated from them only by the lion's body. An invisible thread of terror and hatred connected the three, stretched to its breaking point. Sophia's flashlight beam finally found the lion. The sight made her stop. He was even more imposing up close, a white specter in the darkness, his golden eyes reflecting the light with terrifying intensity. Sophia felt a chill run through her body, but it wasn't fear. It was renewed fury. That animal was there, protecting her mother. It was an insult, an affront to her intelligence, to her determination. Well, the old woman and her new best friend, Sophia murmured, her voice icy and laden with scorn. She couldn't see Donna Elara, but she knew she was there, hidden behind the beast. Do you really think an animal will save you, mother? How pathetic. The lion let out a more audible growl this time, a deep sound that made the ground vibrate. His lips curled slightly, revealing fangs sharp as daggers. He was not a guard dog, but a predator, and the threat before him was clear. Sophia took a step forward, knife pointed. "Get out of the way, beast. This isn't about you." She knew she couldn't face the lion, but perhaps she could intimidate him, or, if necessary, distract him long enough to reach her mother. Her mind already calculated the possibilities, the risks. She wasn't afraid of blood, not when so much was at stake. Donna Elara, hearing her daughter's voice, felt a knot in her throat. It was the same voice that had lulled her to sleep as a child, the same voice that had betrayed her on the bridge. But now, there was a tone of cruelty she had never imagined possible. She tried to move, to somehow intervene, but her aching, exhausted body barely responded. She was at the mercy of the lion, at the mercy of her daughter. The lion took a step forward, moving a little further out of the cave entrance. His eyes did not waver. He was not an animal that retreated. Sophia, in turn, realized the seriousness of the situation. That lion would not be easily dissuaded. He was protecting something or someone, and she knew exactly who. The knife in her hand seemed small and useless against the brute force of that animal, but she had an advantage: intelligence and cruelty. "All right," Sophia said, a dangerous smile forming on her lips. "If you want to play hero, then let's play." She didn't attack the lion directly. Instead, she began to move laterally, trying to flank the cave entrance, looking for a gap in the dense bushes that surrounded it. She knew the lion couldn't be everywhere at once, and her mother, wounded and exhausted, wouldn't be able to move quickly. The night was long, and Sophia had time, and a determination that bordered on insanity. The hunt was far from over. In fact, it was just beginning, and the air was charged with the promise of a brutal and inevitable confrontation. The night was a dark canvas, painted with invisible threats, and Sophia, a shadow among shadows, moved with the cold precision of a predator. Her footsteps were almost inaudible, the rustle of leaves beneath her trail shoes muffled by the relentless determination that propelled her. She was not a hunter for sport, but out of necessity, and her prey, her own mother, was there just a few meters away, protected by an improbable guardian. The flashlight's beam, a faint and flickering ray, swept the uneven ground, revealing twisted roots and thorny bushes. Sophia wasn't looking for an easy path. She was looking for an opening, a flaw in the lion's defense. Her eyes, accustomed to darkness and reading complex contracts, now deciphered the terrain with the same acuity, seeking the weak point. Inside the rocky recess, Donna Ilara felt every muscle in the lion's body vibrate with contained tension. The air was heavy, charged with the smell of the damp forest, of moss, and unmistakably of the danger lurking outside. She could hear Sophia's footsteps, now more distant, but still present, circling the perimeter. It was a macabre dance, a ballet of life and death, and she was the prize, the victim, the reason. The hope the lion had ignited in her chest began to mingle with despair. How far could that animal go to protect her? And why? The lion, a white spectre in the gloom, slowly turned his head, his golden eyes following the movement of the light beam dancing among the trees. He didn't growl, didn't make a sound. His vigilance was silent, but absolute. Every fiber of his being was alert, his ears catching the slightest snap of a branch, the most subtle displacement of air. Sophia's scent, which had once been a distant threat, now became more diffused, spreading around the cave. She was trying to flank, trying to find an angle, and the lion knew it. His instincts, forged in millennia of hunting and survival, were the best weapon against human cunning. Sophia, realizing that the front entrance was a dead end, began to move further to the right, where the vegetation seemed a little less dense. She imagined that if she could sneak around from behind, she might be able to surprise the lion, or at least create a distraction that would allow her to reach her mother. The hunting knife in her hand seemed a mere toy compared to the lion's potential ferocity. But she trusted her speed and her ability to think under pressure. The money, the empire she so desired, was one step away, and she would not allow a wild animal, however rare, to stand in her way. Suddenly, a sound, not a step but a more intense rustle, as if something had moved quickly among the bushes. The lion reacted in an instant. With a fluid and powerful movement, he turned, his muscles tense, his eyes fixed in the direction of the sound. A low growl, almost a hiss, escaped his throat, a clear warning. Donna Ilara, behind him, felt the ground tremble with the animal's force. She closed her eyes, her heart pounding. The confrontation was imminent. Sophia had thrown a small, heavy stone into a distant bush, a simple trick to divert the lion's attention. As the animal turned towards the sound, she seized the fraction of a second. With surprising agility, she ran, not forward, but to the opposite side, crawling under a tangle of vines and thorny bushes. Her arms and legs scraped, but she ignored the pain. Her goal was the cave entrance, the lion's blind spot, the place where her mother was vulnerable. The lion, realizing the deception, let out a furious roar, a sound that echoed through the forest, sending nocturnal birds flying in panic. He turned again, his eyes searching for Sophia, but she was already moving, a dark smudge against the even deeper darkness of the woods. She was closer now, dangerously close. Donna Ilara, hearing the roar and the sounds of the silent struggle, opened her eyes and saw her daughter's silhouette emerge from the shadows, the knife faintly gleaming in the light of the flashlight Sophia had dropped moments before in her rush. "Mother!" Sophia's voice was a hoarse whisper, laden with a fury that made Donna Ilara cower even further. "You can't hide forever!" The lion, with a speed that belied his size, leaped, not directly at Sophia, but to block her path, planting himself again at the cave entrance, his eyes fixed on the daughter. He had underestimated her cunning, but he would not underestimate her again. His lips curled, revealing his fangs, a final and unequivocal warning. He was not a toy nor a guard dog. He was a predator, and the threat to his protected one was real and immediate. Sophia stopped, a few meters from the lion, the knife raised. The air was electrified. She could feel the warmth of the animal's body, the wild scent, the promise of violence. Her eyes met Donna Ilara's, who watched her with a mixture of terror and a strange, new resilience. The old woman wasn't just scared. There was something more there, a spark of defiance that Sophia didn't expect. The hunt had transformed into a standoff, a battle of wills between human cruelty and animal loyalty. The night was still young, and the forest, a silent witness, awaited the outcome. The air was heavy, dense with the promise of violence. Sophia, the hunting knife raised, seemed a diminutive figure against the imposing albino lion. Her eyes, accustomed to calculating risks in air-conditioned boardrooms, now swept the darkness in search of a breach, a weak point. The flashlight, dropped somewhere in her previous rush, left her at a disadvantage, plunged into the gloom that the lion, with his white coat, seemed to dominate. He was a ghost, a silent and deadly threat, his golden eyes fixed on her, unwavering. Sophia's fury seethed, but it was a cold, calculating fury. That animal was an obstacle, an unexpected challenge that prevented her from reaching what was hers by right. The empire, the fortune, the legacy, everything was there just a few meters away, protected by a beast that defied logic. She couldn't attack the lion directly. The knife would be useless against that mass of muscle. Cunning, the intelligence that had led her to the top of the corporate world, would be her only weapon. Inside the cave, Donna Ilara watched the scene with her heart in her throat. The lion's roar still echoed in her ears, a primal sound that terrified and, paradoxically, protected her. She saw her daughter's silhouette, the knife glinting in the gloom, and felt the hatred emanating from her like a chilling heat. But something had changed. The spark of defiance Sophia had perceived was real. It was no longer just paralyzing fear. It was a mixture of despair, yes, but also a silent refusal to be a victim again. The lion, her improbable guardian, had rekindled a spark of life in her. The lion took a step forward, a slow and deliberate movement that made the ground tremble slightly. His lips curled again, revealing sharp fangs, a warning that needed no words. He was ready. His body, a living sculpture of strength and agility, was tense, every muscle prepared for attack or defense. He was not a circus animal nor a trained dog. He was wild nature in its purest form, and the threat to his protected one was unacceptable. Sophia took a step back, not out of fear, but to gain time, to recalibrate. Her eyes swept the ground, looking for something, anything she could use. Stones, branches, the dense vegetation itself. The forest was her enemy and her ally. She needed a bigger distraction, something that could unbalance the predator, even for an instant. Suddenly, her eyes fell upon the weak and intermittent beam of the flashlight that had fallen. It was a few meters away, halfway between her and the cave entrance, its flickering light creating dancing shadows. A dangerous idea began to form in her mind. "Do you really think you can stop me?" Sophia murmured, her voice low and full of venom, directed at the lion. "I'm going to get past you, beast, and then I'm going to finish what I started." The lion responded with a deep growl, a sound that seemed to come from the center of the earth. He didn't understand the words, but he understood the threat in her voice, the murderous intent in the woman's eyes. Sophia then did something unexpected. Instead of advancing, she quickly bent down, picked up a fist-sized stone, and with all her strength hurled it towards the fallen flashlight. The impact was dry and precise. The flashlight, already damaged, shattered, and the beam of light died, plunging the area into near-total darkness. Darkness was a double-edged sword. For Sophia, it meant less visibility, but for the lion, it meant He would no longer be such an obvious target, and his night-adapted eyes could still see well. However, the sudden noise and the loss of the only visible light source created an instant of disorientation. And it was in that instant that Sophia acted. With surprising speed, she didn't run forward, but to the side, in the opposite direction to where she had tried before, where a small, almost imperceptible crack in the rock seemed to offer a narrow passage. She knew it was an immense risk, that she could get stuck or be intercepted, but it was her only chance. The lion, realizing the movement, let out a furious roar that made Donna Ilara's hairs stand on end. He turned, but Sophia was already squeezing through the crack, her slender body barely passing between the rough rocks. The knife, still in her hand, scraped against the stone, producing a sharp, metallic sound. "Mother!" Sophia's voice, muffled by the rock, seemed to come from another world. But the terror in her tone was unmistakable. She was gaining ground. Donna Ilara, seeing her daughter's silhouette disappear into the crack, felt renewed panic. She was almost there, almost within reach. The lion, in turn, could not pass through the narrow crack. He was trapped, blocked by the very geography of the place. He growled and scratched at the rock, but it was useless. Sophia's cunning had found a flaw in his defense. The old woman, with a strength she didn't know she possessed, tried to stand, but her aching body gave way. She was trapped, vulnerable. The crack was narrow, but not long. Sophia would emerge on the other side in a matter of seconds, and then nothing would stand between them. The lion, furious and helpless, watched his protected one's daughter crawl towards victory. The hunt was about to reach its climax, and the forest, now completely dark, awaited the inevitable final confrontation. Donna Ilara's fate hung by a thread, and the lion, for the first time, seemed unable to intervene. The darkness of the cave swallowed Sophia for an instant, the sound of her body scraping against the rough rock filling the tense silence. Each scratch of the knife on the stone was a metallic echo, a countdown for Donna Ilara. The passage was tight, suffocating, but Sophia felt no claustrophobia. She felt the adrenaline of imminent victory. She could smell the damp earth and the wild scent of the lion, now more distant, muffled by the rock. But she knew she was almost there. On the other side of the crack, Donna Ilara watched the point where Sophia's silhouette had disappeared. Her eyes, accustomed to the gloom, fixed on the narrow opening, awaiting the inevitable. Her body ached, every muscle protested, but the spark of defiance in her chest now burned stronger. She had survived the fall from the bridge, the river's current, the darkness of the forest, and her own daughter's fury. She would not surrender now, not with the lion, her improbable guardian, roaring outside, a wild promise of protection. Suddenly, a different sound. Not Sophia's dragging, but a dry snap, followed by a rustle of leaves and small debris. Sophia was emerging. Her head appeared first, her hair tangled and her face marked by tension, but with a gleam of triumph in her eyes. The hunting knife, still in her hand, faintly reflected the little light filtering from the main cave entrance, now unprotected by the darkness of the broken flashlight. "Mother," Sophia's voice was a hoarse whisper, almost a hiss, laden with macabre satisfaction. "Did you really think you could hide from me?" Donna Ilara tried to move away, dragging herself to the back of the cave, but her weak limbs barely responded. She was cornered, like a wounded animal. But instead of screaming, she found an unexpected strength. "You won't succeed," she replied, her voice trembling but firm. "Not this time." Sophia let out a short, bitter laugh, a sound that echoed through the cave walls. "Oh, really? And who's going to stop me? Your new furry friend? He's out there, trapped, like a useless guard dog." She took a step forward, the knife raised, her eyes fixed on her mother. The distance between them rapidly decreased. Outside, the albino lion roared with a fury that made the earth tremble. He clawed at the rock of the main entrance, helpless before the narrow crack Sophia had used. His instincts screamed for him to protect his companion, but the physical barrier was insurmountable. He was not a circus animal, but a wild predator, and his intelligence was as sharp as his claws. He couldn't pass through the crack, but perhaps there was another way. His golden eyes swept the rocky wall above the crack, looking for a weakness, a fissure, anything. The rock was solid, but there was a ledge, an unstable formation that seemed to project precariously. It was a risk, but the lion did not hesitate. With a powerful leap, he propelled himself, his claws digging into the rock, climbing with surprising agility for his size. He was not a mountain feline, but the urgency in his heart propelled him. Inside the cave, Sophia was just a few steps from Donna Ilara. "It's the end, Mother," she said, the blade glinting menacingly. "The Empire is mine. It always has been." She extended her free hand to grab her mother's arm, ready to drag her out, to finish what she had started on the bridge. But before her fingers could touch Donna Ilara, a deafening sound tore through the air. It wasn't a roar, but a rumble, as if the mountain itself was splitting apart. Stones and earth began to collapse from the upper part of the cave entrance, directly above the crack where Sophia had entered. The lion, with brute and calculated force, had managed to destabilize the rocky ledge. A cloud of dust and debris filled the cave, and smaller stones ricocheted off the floor. Sophia recoiled sharply, shielding her face with her arm, the knife still in hand. The noise was deafening, the darkness now even denser with dust, almost total. She was disoriented, coughing, her plans interrupted by a force she could not control. The lion, who had fallen back to the ground with the impact of the collapsing rock, didn't care about the pain. He had created a barrier, a new distraction. Sophia's passage was now blocked by a pile of rubble, and the main cave entrance, though still accessible, was partially obstructed. "What? What was that?" Sophia choked, her voice full of anger and frustration. She tried to advance again, but the pile of stones was impassable, and the dust blinded her eyes. Donna Ilara, though startled, felt a wave of hope. The lion was not helpless. He had found a way. She heard the animal's deep growl from outside, a sound that now seemed like a song of victory. The hunt hadn't ended, but the game had changed again. The lion, even blocked, was still the guardian, and the night, still young, promised more twists and turns in the dark forest. The dust, dense and suffocating, swallowed the air of the cave, transforming the precarious refuge into a dusty trap. The rumble of the collapse still echoed in the rocky walls, a brutal reminder of the albino lion's intelligence and strength. Sophia coughed, the dust irritating her eyes and throat, her vision obscured by the grey cloud that hung. The knife in her hand felt heavier, and the gleam of triumph in her eyes had been replaced by a contained fury. The narrow passage, her escape and attack route, was now sealed by a pile of rubble, a monument to her own cunning turned against her. "Damn animal!" Sophia's voice was a growl, muffled by the dust but laden with venom. She tried to take a step towards the pile of stones, but the unstable ground and lack of visibility made her hesitate. The lion was not just an obstacle, he was a strategist, a predator who had turned the tables. The hunt had transformed into a siege, and Sophia, the hunter, now found herself cornered. On the other side of the dust cloud, Donna Ilara, though shaken by the noise and the falling stones, felt a momentary relief. The lion had acted. He had not abandoned her. Hope, which for an instant had seemed an unattainable luxury, rekindled in her chest. She was still weak, her body aching, but the presence of the wild guardian, even if from outside, was a balm to her soul. She dragged herself a little further into the back of the cave, seeking the protection of the shadows, hoping that the darkness and dust could conceal her for a few more precious seconds. Outside, the albino lion wasted no time. The roar he let out was not one of frustration, but of fierce determination. He had blocked Sophia's passage, but his mission was not yet complete. Donna Ilara was inside, vulnerable, and he needed to reach her. His golden eyes, which pierced the darkness with ease, swept the main cave entrance. The pile of debris he himself had caused partially obstructed the path, but did not completely block it. It was a challenge, but not an impediment. With a powerful roar, the lion began to push the larger stones with his head and front paws. Every movement was calculated, every muscle tense. He was not a digging animal, but the urgency in his heart propelled him. His sharp claws scraped the rock, and the sound of stones being dragged and rolled filled the night, a counterpoint to the tense silence that had settled inside the cave. The lion was clearing a path inch by inch, determined to fulfill his silent promise. Inside the cave, Sophia finally managed to clear her vision a little, though the dust still hung heavily in the air. She saw her mother's fragile silhouette moving in the back of the cave, a pale shadow against the darkness. The sound of the lion working at the main entrance was a constant reminder that her time was running out. Rage bubbled within her, mixed with a pang of panic. She could not fail now, not after everything. "You won't escape, Mother," Sophia hissed, her voice hoarse. She knew she needed to be fast, decisive. The lion was approaching, and she couldn't afford to be caught between the animal's fury and her mother's resistance. Her eyes, now more accustomed to the gloom, searched for a route, a path through the cave to corner Donna Ilara. The hunting knife, still firm in her hand, was the only certainty amidst the chaos. Donna Ilara, hearing her daughter's voice, felt a chill run down her spine. She knew time was running out. The sound of the lion battling the rubble was her only hope. She needed to buy more time, just a few more seconds. Her eyes swept the cave floor, looking for something, anything she could use to defend herself or create a distraction. Her weak hand fumbled on the damp ground and found a loose, irregular, sharp stone. It was small, but it was all she had. Sophia advanced, her steps cautious but determined. Darkness was her ally and her enemy. She could hear her mother's ragged breathing, the faint sound of her body dragging. "It's useless to hide," she said, her voice louder now, echoing off the cave walls. "I will find you." The lion, from outside, had managed to move some of the larger stones, opening a slightly wider gap in the entrance. A faint beam of moonlight, previously blocked, now penetrated the cave, cutting through the dust and creating a silvery trail on the floor. He could see Donna Ilara, the fragile silhouette in the back, and he could smell Sophia, the imminent threat. He let out a roar that made the entire cave vibrate, a warning, a promise. Sophia stopped, the roar making her recoil a step. The lion was almost there. She had no more time for games. She needed to act. With an explosion of speed, she ran towards Donna Ilara, the knife raised, determined to end everything before the lion could intervene. Donna Ilara, seeing her daughter's figure rapidly approaching, felt panic take over. But instead of screaming, she raised the stone she had found. It wasn't to attack, but to create a last act of desperation. With all the strength she had left, she hurled the stone towards the main entrance where the lion was working. The goal was not the lion, but the noise, the distraction. The stone ricocheted off one of the loose rocks the lion was pushing, producing a sharp and unexpected sound. The lion, surprised by the sudden noise and unexpected movement, hesitated for an instant, but that instant was enough. The rock he was pushing, already unstable, gave way under the force of Donna Ilara's stone impact, rolling aside and opening a passage wide enough for him to enter. The albino lion, without losing a second, squeezed through the opening, his massive body barely fitting, and entered the cave. The darkness of the cave was broken by the imposing figure of the lion. His golden eyes shone with fierce intensity, fixed on Sophia, who was a few meters from her mother, the knife still raised. The hunt had reached its climax. The forest had witnessed the fall, the rescue, the pursuit, and now the final confrontation within the darkness of the cave. The lion was inside, and the millionaire daughter, for the first time, was face to face with the wild guardian, with no barriers between them. The albino lion's entrance into the cave was not just a physical event. It was a rupture in the very reality Sophia had constructed. The imposing figure of the feline, with his incandescent golden eyes piercing the gloom, filled the opening, transforming the precarious refuge into a stage for a primal drama. Sophia froze. The knife, once an extension of her murderous will, now seemed a useless toy before the muscular mass and concentrated fury that faced her. The air in the cave seemed to thin, heavy with tension and the wild scent of the predator, an aroma that spoke of forest, of hunt, of incontestable power. The roar the lion let out was not just a sound. It was a vibration that traveled through the ground, the rocky walls and Sophia's own chest, making her stagger a step back. It was a warning, a silent declaration of war, and the promise of brutal retribution. Sophia's mind, accustomed to calculating risks and manipulating people, was in a meltdown. Her meticulous plans, her ascent to power, everything was crumbling before that irrational yet incredibly determined animal. The rage, which had once propelled her, now mingled with an icy panic that climbed her spine. She looked at the knife in her hand, then at her mother's fragile figure, cowering at the back of the cave, and finally at the lion's relentless eyes. There was no escape. There was no negotiation. This was an enemy that could not be bought, bribed, or deceived. The only language he understood was that of brute force, and Sophia knew that, in that regard, she was at an overwhelming disadvantage. Donna Ilara, in turn, watched the scene with a complex mixture of terror and an almost delirious hope. The lion was there. Her improbable guardian had fulfilled his silent promise, emerging from the darkness like a living legend, but the threat had not disappeared. Sophia was still there, the knife still in hand, and the fury in her eyes was palpable, a dangerous flame that could erupt at any moment. The lion's presence was a shield, but a shield that could be broken. She knew she needed to trust the animal's instinct, his strength, but the fear that everything could go wrong at any moment still paralyzed her, keeping her pressed against the cold cave wall. The lion did not hesitate. His golden eyes did not stray from Sophia, fixed on her with an intensity that seemed to penetrate her soul. He was not an animal of indiscriminate attack. He was a protector, and his priority was the fragile woman behind him. With a fluid and surprisingly swift movement for his size, he positioned himself between Sophia and Donna Ilara, his massive body forming an insurmountable barrier. His tail lashed softly from side to side, a sign of his concentration and readiness for combat. He let out a low, continuous growl, a sound that seemed to come from the depths of the earth, a clear warning. One more step, and retribution would be immediate. Sophia, cornered, felt despair take over. The chance of her empire, of her freedom, was slipping through her fingers like sand. She could not allow it. Not after everything she had done, all the risks she had taken. In an act of pure insanity, driven by rage and panic, she raised the knife and advanced. Not against the lion, but in a desperate attempt to flank the animal and reach Donna Ilara. It was a suicidal move, a last gasp of her distorted determination, but logic had abandoned Sophia. She was merely fury and despair, a wounded beast in her own lair. The lion, however, was faster. His reflexes were those of a predator at the peak of his strength, sharpened by years of jungle survival. Before Sophia could take more than 2 steps, the lion moved, not with a frontal attack, but with a calculated strike. His front paw, armed with razor-sharp claws, descended with surprising speed, not to kill, but to disarm. The impact was dry and brutal. The knife flew from Sophia's hand, ricocheting off the cave walls with a metallic sound before falling into a dark corner, out of her reach. Sophia screamed, not from immediate physical pain, but from pure frustration and shock. Her last resort had been torn from her, and with it, her last hope. With the knife out of the picture, the dynamic changed drastically. The lion was no longer just a guardian, he was a hunter, and Sophia the hunter had become the prey. The lion advanced a step, his growl intensifying, a guttural sound that promised retribution. Sophia, without her weapon, without her advantage, turned and ran. There was no more dignity, only the primal urgency to survive. She ran for the main cave entrance, the same one the lion had entered, hoping to find a gap, a path to freedom in the dark forest. But the lion was in hot pursuit, his heavy, decisive footsteps echoing in the cave, each beat a reminder of his relentless chase. Sophia squeezed through the opening the lion had forced, scraping herself on the sharp stones, adrenaline coursing through her veins like a wild river. She emerged into the night, the moonlight seeming a beacon of hope, an invitation to escape. But the forest was not her ally. The lion, with a powerful roar that made the trees tremble, followed her out of the cave. The hunt had restarted, but now on more open ground, where the feline's speed and agility would be even more decisive. Sophia ran blindly, without direction, just away from the lion, away from the cave, away from her mother. But the forest, with its treacherous shadows and hidden roots, was ready to exact its price. She stumbled, falling to her knees, her breath ragged, her heart pounding uncontrollably against her ribs. The lion was just a few meters away, his golden eyes gleaming in the darkness, a terrifying and beautiful sight. Sophia tried to stand, but her muscles were failing, her legs refusing to obey. The lion approached, not with the haste of a killer, but with the inevitability of fate. He stopped a few steps from her, his imposing body casting a dark shadow over her fallen figure, a shadow that seemed to swallow her. The silence of the forest was broken only by Sophia's ragged breathing and the lion's low, deep growl. It was the end of the line. The hunt was over. And justice, in the form of an albino lion who hated water but who had plunged to save a life, was about to be served. The silence of the forest was broken only by Sophia's ragged breathing and the lion's low, deep growl. It was the end of the line. The hunt was over. And justice, in the form of an albino lion who hated water but who had plunged to save a life, was about to be served. Sophia, prostrate on the damp forest floor, felt the cold earth penetrate her bones. Her eyes, once full of arrogance and calculation, now reflected pure, helpless terror. She looked at the lion, the mythical creature that had destroyed her carefully constructed world. There was no more knife, no more money, no more influence. There was only her, fragile and insignificant before the untamed force of nature. The lion did not attack. He merely watched her, his golden eyes fixed on her, with an intensity that seemed to strip her soul bare, revealing the rot that hid behind the facade of wealth and power. It was as if the animal was reading every one of her thoughts, every one of her crimes, and delivering a silent judgment. The lion's growl intensified, not a sound of explosive rage, but of a contained threat, a final warning. He lowered his head slightly, his muscles tense, ready for any movement. Sophia tried to drag herself backward, but her legs did not respond, paralyzed by fear and exhaustion. Every fiber of her being screamed for her to run, but there was nowhere to go. The forest, which had once seemed a refuge, was now a trap, and the lion her jailer. Meanwhile, inside the cave, Donna Elara heard the muffled sounds of the chase, the lion's final roar, Sophia's scream, and then the heavy silence that followed. Her heart pounded, a mixture of relief and dread. She knew the lion was out there, protecting her, but the image of Sophia, her own daughter with the knife raised, was still etched in her mind. The pain of betrayal was almost as unbearable as the fear of death. She cowered even further, tears streaming down her face, marked by life and pain. What would happen now? The lion would protect her, but what about Sophia? The idea of her daughter facing the fury of a wild animal, even after everything, still disturbed her. She was a mother, after all, and the bond, however corroded, could not be completely broken. Outside the cave, the lion took another step, closing the distance between them. Sophia closed her eyes, awaiting the final blow, the pain, the end. But the blow did not come. Instead, she felt an immense weight on her body. The lion had placed one of his front paws on her back, not with enough force to crush her, but to completely immobilize her, pinning her to the ground. His claws, though not dug in, were dangerously close to her skin, a silent promise of what could happen if she tried to resist. The wild scent of the lion enveloped her, a visceral reminder of her helplessness. He held her there, prostrate, humiliated, as time seemed to stretch. The night breeze whispered through the leaves, and the distant sounds of the forest seemed to mock her plight. Sophia's pride, her fortune, her life of luxury, everything had been reduced to this moment, trapped under an animal's paw, at the mercy of the nature she so despised. It was a cruel irony, a form of poetic justice that the forest had orchestrated. Suddenly, a distant sound broke the silence. A bark, then another, closer, and then human voices. Sophia opened her eyes, a spark of hope, or perhaps a new kind of panic, igniting in her gaze. Someone was coming, but who? And what would they do upon finding her in that situation? The lion, sensing the approach, raised his head, his ears moving, attentive. He let out a louder growl, a warning to the newcomers, but also a sign that his vigil was about to end. The barks became more insistent, and a strong light began to cut through the forest's darkness. It was a search party, likely alerted by the sounds of the chase, or Donna Ilara's prolonged absence. Scent dogs, trained to find lost people, were on the trail. The lion, with a last look at Sophia, who was still immobilized and trembling, withdrew his paw. He was not an animal of unnecessary confrontation. His mission had been accomplished. He had protected Donna Ilara and delivered her tormentor to her own fate, and now to human justice. With a majestic and silent movement, the albino lion turned and disappeared into the forest shadows as quickly as he had appeared. His mythical figure dissolved among the trees, leaving behind only the wild scent and the image etched in Sophia's mind. She was free from the lion's paw, but not from its consequences. The search party, led by an experienced forest ranger, burst into the clearing. Their spotlights swept the area, revealing Sophia's figure, fallen and disheveled, with scratches and dirt all over her body. The dogs, scenting the lion, became agitated, but the animal was already gone. The forest ranger, seeing the woman in shock but unharmed by serious injuries, approached cautiously. "Madam, are you all right? What happened here?" Sophia couldn't speak. Her lips trembled, and her eyes, fixed on the spot where the lion had disappeared, were filled with a story no one would believe. The knife, fallen in the corner of the cave, would be found. Donna Ilara, traumatized but alive, would be rescued, and the truth, however unbelievable, would come to light. The albino lion had played his part. Now, it was up to humans to deal with theirs. The forest, silent witness to the entire drama, seemed to sigh in relief as the night slowly yielded to the first glimpse of dawn. Justice, wild and relentless, had prevailed. The forest ranger, his headlights sweeping over Sophia's prostrate figure, repeated the question, his voice laden with professional caution. "Madam, are you all right? What happened here?" But Sophia couldn't formulate an answer. Her lips trembled. The cold pre-dawn air seemed to freeze the words in her throat. Her eyes, once so calculating, were now wells of terror and disbelief, fixed on the spot where the lion had disappeared. How to explain the inexplicable? How to tell a man in uniform about an albino lion, an improbable guardian who had saved her from death only to deliver her to an even more relentless justice. The scent dogs, though agitated by the wild smell that permeated the air, were restrained by their handlers. They sensed the recent presence of a large feline, but the predator was no longer there. The search party, accustomed to finding lost and frightened people, but rarely confronted with such a bizarre scenario, exchanged confused glances. Sophia, with tangled hair, torn clothes, and a body covered in scratches and dirt, seemed an apparition, a ghost of her former life of luxury. "Is there anyone else with you, madam?" asked another guard, noticing the absence of anyone else and Sophia's strange stillness. The question, simple and direct, seemed to pierce the fog of shock that enveloped her. Her mother, Donna Ilara, the image of the knife, the lion, the cave, everything mingled in her mind. She tried to point, but her arm felt too heavy. A guttural sound escaped her throat, something between a moan and a sob. The forest ranger, noticing the woman's deep state of shock, decided not to press further. "Let's search around here. Perhaps there's someone else injured." He signaled to his team. 2 guards and a scent dog headed for the cave entrance, the same one Sophia had fled through and where Donna Ilara was still cowering. Inside the damp darkness, Donna Ilara heard the barks and human voices approaching. A mixture of hope and dread invaded her. Was it them? Would they come to save her? Or would it be Sophia somehow returning? Her eyes, accustomed to the gloom, saw the headlights invade the cave entrance, cutting through the shadows. A scent dog, with its curious muzzle, was the first to enter, followed by the guards. "Hello? Is anyone here?" One of the guards' voices echoed, a sound of relief for Donna Ilara. She tried to stand, but her legs were numb and her body exhausted. "Here! I'm here!" Her voice was a hoarse whisper, almost inaudible, but the dog had already scented her. The guards found her cowering, trembling, her eyes wide but alive. The relief on their faces was palpable. "Madam, thank God, are you all right?" one of them asked, kneeling to assess her. Donna Ilara nodded weakly, tears streaming down her face. She was traumatized, but the sight of human faces, of help, was a balm to her wounded soul. As one of the guards helped her out of the cave, the other, with his headlight, swept the interior. It was then that he saw it, faintly gleaming in a dark corner, the hunting knife, its ivory handle stained with earth, its blade sharp. A strange object to find in a cave. He picked it up carefully, his fingertips avoiding the blade. "We found a knife here," he announced, his voice laden with a new tone of concern. Outside the cave, Sophia watched her mother being helped. The relief she should have felt was overshadowed by a new wave of panic. Donna Ilara was alive, and Donna Ilara would speak. The truth, which she had tried so hard to bury, was about to come to light. The main forest ranger, upon seeing Donna Ilara, approached. "Madam, what happened? Your daughter is here, but she can't speak." Donna Ilara looked at Sophia, her eyes tear-filled, a complex mixture of pain, betrayal, and, surprisingly, a remnant of maternal love. She could not lie, not after everything, not after the lion. With a choked but firm voice, Donna Ilara began to narrate the night's events. The bridge, the push, the fall into the river, the current, the albino lion, the cave, the knife, the attempted murder. Every word was a blow to Sophia's world, every sentence a nail in her coffin of lies. The guards listened, shocked, as the unbelievable story unfolded. The knife found in the cave was irrefutable proof, a cold and tangible object that corroborated Donna Ilara's narrative. Sophia, hearing her mother's voice, felt the ground collapse beneath her feet. She tried to protest, tried to deny, but the words wouldn't come. Her body trembled uncontrollably, not just from cold, but from a primal fear. The lion had spared her physical death, but had delivered her to a fate she feared more than anything: public humiliation, the loss of everything she valued, the justice of men. The forest ranger, after hearing Donna Ilara's account and inspecting the knife, turned to Sophia. His eyes, once merely curious, now carried the weight of the law. "Madam Sophia, you are being detained for questioning. We have reason to believe you attempted to murder your mother." The handcuffs, cold and metallic, were placed on her wrists. The dry click echoed in the forest that was now beginning to lighten with the first rays of the sun. The light of dawn, which should have brought hope, only revealed the rawness of her situation. Sophia, the millionaire daughter who lived in a world of privilege, was now in custody, her fortune and influence useless against the truth that had emerged from the depths of the river and the darkness of the forest. The albino lion, the improbable guardian, had played his part. He had plunged into the waters he hated to save a life, and had delivered justice to those who sought it. The forest, with its secrets and its own laws, had witnessed the fall of a queen and the triumph of a brutal truth. The hunt was over, but Sophia's legal battle was just beginning, and the shadows of her crimes would be exposed to the light of day for all to see. The cold handcuffs closed on Sophia's wrists, a metallic sound that seemed to seal her fate. The light of dawn, which had once promised a new day, now only illuminated the rawness of her fall. The millionaire daughter, accustomed to giving orders and having all her wishes fulfilled, was now in custody, her fortune and influence useless against the truth that had emerged from the depths of the river and the darkness of the forest. The albino lion, the improbable guardian, had played his part. He had plunged into the waters he hated to save a life, and had delivered justice to those who sought it. The forest, with its secrets and its own laws, had witnessed the fall of a queen and the triumph of a brutal truth. The hunt was over, but Sophia's legal battle was just beginning, and the shadows of her crimes would be exposed to the light of day for all to see. The walk back from the forest was a calvary for Sophia. Every step was a painful reminder of the abyss into which she had fallen. The forest rangers, once mere figures of authority in a distant setting, now escorted her like a criminal. The smell of wet earth and decaying leaves, which once repulsed her, now seemed to permeate her own skin, a constant reminder of her humiliation. She couldn't look at Donna Ilara, who was carefully supported by another guard with an emergency blanket over her shoulders. The image of her mother, fragile and traumatized, but alive, was a thorn in her conscience, an undeniable testament to her monstrosity. Donna Ilara, in turn, felt a complex mixture of relief and sadness. Rescue had come, but at a devastating cost. Her own daughter, whom she loved despite everything, was being taken into custody. The words she had spoken in the clearing, each one a stab to Sophia's heart, were the truth. And the truth, however painful, needed to be told. She clung to the memory of the albino lion, to his courage and his miraculous intervention, like a beacon of hope amidst the darkness of her own family. As they approached the road, the first signs of civilization emerged. The distant sound of an engine, the flashing lights of emergency vehicles. News of the search for Donna Ilara had already spread, and the presence of a medical rescue team and police vehicles was a harbinger of what was to come. The outside world, with its hunger for drama and scandal, was about to swallow Sophia's story. Upon leaving the trail and reaching the main road, camera flashes erupted. Reporters, alerted by the commotion and the notoriety of Sophia's family, were already on site. Microphones were extended. Questions were fired, but Sophia, with a pale face and empty eyes, couldn't answer. She was a pathetic figure, a stark contrast to the elegant and confident woman everyone knew. The handcuffs on her wrists gleamed under the spotlights, an undeniable symbol of her new reality. Donna Ilara was immediately attended to by paramedics, who took her to an ambulance. Before getting in, she looked at Sophia, a gaze that contained 1,000 emotions. pain, forgiveness, but also an unwavering resolve. Justice would be served. Sophia was placed in a police car, the dark glass offering a brief illusion of privacy. But she knew there was nowhere left to hide. The smell of leather and disinfectant inside the vehicle was a shocking contrast to the fresh forest air. And the tense silence was broken only by the police radio, which crackled with codes and instructions. She tried to process everything, but her mind was in a whirlwind. The image of the albino lion, his golden eyes fixed on her, his heavy paw on her chest, was a memory that would haunt her forever. He had been her judge, her executioner, and, ironically, her savior. At the police station, the reality of her situation solidified. The questions, the formalities, the booking sheet, her name, Sophia Montenegro, once synonymous with power and prestige, was now just another name on a police report. The knife, the cold, silent object that should have sealed her mother's fate, was now in an evidence bag, irrefutable proof of her criminal intent. The interrogation was long and exhaustive. Sophia tried to maintain her facade, tried to deny, tried to distort the facts, but Donna Ilara's story, corroborated by the knife and the circumstances of her rescue, was unassailable. With every question, every piece of evidence presented, the house of cards she had built crumbled a little more. The prosecutor, a man with a serious demeanor and firm voice, was not fooled by her arrogant posture. He saw through the facade. Straight to the darkness she tried to hide. News of the case exploded in the media. Millionaire daughter tries to kill her own mother. The Montenegro family drama. The albino lion, legend or reality. The lion's story, initially treated with skepticism, began to gain traction as Donna Ilara, in her testimony, insisted on the veracity of his intervention. The mythical figure of the albino lion became a fascinating element, adding a layer of mystery and wonder to an already shocking story. Sophia was formally charged with attempted murder. Her lawyers, the best money could buy, began to work, but the mountain of evidence against her was overwhelming. Her life of luxury, her privileges, everything seemed to have been torn from her in an instant. She was trapped, not just behind bars, but also in the web of her own lies and cruelty. Meanwhile, Donna Ilara recovered in a hospital, surrounded by a medical team and a new wave of public attention. She was physically exhausted, but her mind was clear. She had survived, and her survival, driven by the courage of an improbable animal, was a testament to the strength of life and the inevitability of justice. The albino lion, the guardian of the forest, had disappeared as mysteriously as he appeared, but his legacy was undeniable. He had changed the course of 2 lives and had exposed the truth the forest held. Sophia's legal battle was just beginning, but the moral verdict had already been delivered, not by men, but by nature itself. The cell was cold, damp, and small. A brutal contrast to the luxurious apartments and spacious mansions where Sophia Montenegro had spent her entire life. The smell of disinfectant mingled with that of mold and despair, a fragrance that now defined her new reality. The concrete walls seemed to close in on her, and the distant sound of voices and jingling keys was the only soundtrack to her imprisonment. She huddled on the hard cot, the rough blanket offering no comfort against the cold that seemed to come from within. Her mind, once a whirlwind of plans and strategies to maintain her empire, was now dominated by a single image, the golden eyes of the albino lion. That gaze, which had judged her in the darkness of the cave, seemed to follow her even there, in the solitude of the cell. He had spared her physical death, but had condemned her to something she feared much more, the annihilation of her image, the loss of her power, the exposure of her darkest soul. Her lawyers, the same ones who once got her out of any scrape with a phone call, now seemed powerless. The knife, Donna Ilara's confession, the struggle marks on the bridge, Everything accumulated into a mountain of irrefutable evidence. The lion's story, initially dismissed as the delusion of a traumatized elderly woman, took on the contours of an urban legend, fueled by the media and the absence of any other explanation for Donna Elara's miraculous survival. With every news report, every headline, the narrative solidified. Sofia Montenegro, the ruthless heiress, had attempted to murder her own mother. While Sofia languished in her cell, Donna Elara slowly recovered in the hospital. The abrasions and physical shock were only part of the battle. The emotional wound, the betrayal by her own daughter, was deep and would take time to heal. However, there was a renewed strength in her eyes, a determination that the near-fatal experience had forged. She had faced death and malice and had been saved by a creature that defied logic. This experience had transformed her. She recounted her story repeatedly, each time with more detail and conviction. The bridge, the push, the fall, the relentless current, and then the ethereal vision of the albino lion. The feline's improbable plunge, his strength to drag her out of the water, the protection in the cave, and Sofia's final attempt. Every word was a testament not only to her survival, but to the existence of a greater justice, one that operated outside the laws of men. The media was in a frenzy. The story had all the elements of an epic drama: wealth, betrayal, near murder, and a mysterious animal hero. The image of the albino lion, with his immaculate coat and piercing eyes, graced magazine covers and was the subject of debates on television programs. Wildlife experts were called to discuss the improbability of a lion, especially one that hates water, plunging to save a life. The legend of the guardian lion was being born, and with it, a new wave of interest in conservation and the mysteries of nature. For Sofia, every news report was a blow. She saw her name and image dragged through the mud, her reputation in tatters. The family fortune, once a source of power and security, now seemed a curse, the reason behind her downfall. She tried to cling to the hope that her lawyers could find a loophole, that they could discredit her mother. But the truth was an unshakable rock. Days dragged on, turning into weeks. The preliminary hearing approached, and the pressure mounted. The prosecution was determined to make an example of Sofia, given the gravity of the crime and the notoriety of those involved. Society clamored for justice, shocked by the cruelty of a daughter against her mother. Donna Elara, in turn, was preparing for the confrontation. She knew that testifying against Sofia would be one of the most painful acts of her life. But she also knew it was necessary, not just for her, but for the truth, and for the memory of the lion who had risked everything to save her. She sought not revenge, but the reparation of a brutal injustice. The tension was palpable, not only in the courthouse corridors, but throughout the city. The Montenegro Elara case had become a spectacle, a moral tale of greed and redemption. The albino lion, though absent, was a constant presence, a silent reminder that nature has its own means of balancing the scales, of protecting the innocent and exposing darkness. The stage was set for the trial, and the world awaited the final unfolding of this extraordinary drama. Sofia's legal battle was now a fight for her own soul, and the verdict, whatever it might be, would echo far beyond the courtroom walls. The day of the verdict arrived. The courtroom was packed, the media in a frenzy. Sofia was paler than ever, her hands trembling slightly beneath the table. Donna Elara sat in the front row, her expression calm, but her eyes revealing the depth of the pain she felt. The jury entered, their faces solemn. The judge asked for the verdict. The voice of the jury foreman, though low, echoed throughout the room. Guilty. The word hit Sofia like a physical blow. Her eyes closed, and an almost inaudible gasp escaped her lips. The world, which she had tried to mold to her will, had finally turned against her. The handcuffs that had gleamed under the spotlights were now a permanent reality. The sentence followed. Years of imprisonment, a punishment that would strip her of everything she valued, her freedom, her status, her fortune. The empire she had built on ambition and cruelty crumbled, reduced to nothing more than a bitter memory. She would be Sofia Montenegro, not the ruthless heiress, but prisoner number such and such. For Donna Ilara, the verdict brought no joy, but a sense of closure. Justice had been served not out of revenge, but for the truth. She had survived, and her story would become a beacon of hope and resilience. She dedicated the rest of her life to conservation, using her voice and her experience to protect nature and the creatures that inhabit it, especially those who, like the albino lion, defy logic and expectation to perform acts of pure kindness. The albino lion, the silent guardian of the forest, was never seen again. He had fulfilled his purpose, balanced the scales of nature and justice, and then disappeared into the mists of legend. But his story, the story of an animal that overcame its deepest instinct to save a life, echoed through time, a reminder that true strength lies not in power or wealth, but in courage, compassion, and the ability to defy the impossible. Sophia, in her cold cell, would spend her days haunted by the golden eyes of the lion, the silent judge who had condemned her to face herself. Donna Ilara, on the other hand, would find peace in the memory of that gaze, a symbol that, even in the darkest depths of human malice, the light of hope and redemption can always emerge, guided by unexpected hands, or in this case, by powerful paws. The forest kept its secrets, but also revealed its truths, and the deepest of them was that nature, in its wisdom and mystery, would always find a way to restore balance.